Absolutely.
So we'll get started with this, and people I'm sure will float in and out as we go through. If you could just give a little background as like who you are, where you come from, what you do, specialties, things you like, and then obviously because that's cool, but like what do you like to do as a person?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, just like thanks everybody for having me. Pleasure to be here and speaking with all of you lovely people. So just to give you a quick background, my name's Gretchen. I'm a dietitian at The Edge. I'm based out of the Twin Oaks location. Just to clarify, in case anybody's wondering what a dietitian is broadly. So more broadly, a dietitian is someone who is an expert in nutrition science and research and applying that to the health of the population. A little difference, you might have heard the word nutritionist floating around too. So we do incorporate that word into our name. But the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist is that a dietitian can be a nutritionist, but a nutritionist can't be a dietitian. So again, dietitians are similar to like physical therapists or other specialty health professionals. We go to school, we have to have a certain numbers of years of schooling, and now it's up to 6 years. And we have to have at least 1 year residency, what we call a dietetic internship. And then we have to take an exam, and then we have to maintain our credential through a lot of continuing education. So just to give you a little insight into why we are called what we are, we're registered, we're certified. And so if you are planning to work with somebody on your health and nutrition, please look for a registered dietitian is my recommendation, because they are the only experts out there. Okay. I went to UVM. I went to the University of Vermont for my undergraduate degree, my Bachelor of Science in Nutrition. And then I went to the University of Pittsburgh for my master's degree, again, in clinical dietetics and nutrition. There I did my residency at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And I've worked in so many different areas at this point. I am personally interested in sports nutrition. I'm an endurance athlete. I'm a long distance runner. And have played soccer. I have a brother who was a semi-professional athlete in soccer as well. So kind of just getting into it from a personal aspect, sports nutrition that is. Lots of time in clinical, worked in cardiology, lots of good preventative healthcare, things going on that way. So my personal interests are in kind of just preventative medicine, sports nutrition for sure. Yeah, so that's that. Personally, I like to run and be outside as much as possible. So quarantine life is really hard for me to be just inside all the time. So I relate to athletes in the sense that I know you guys are probably dying to get to practice, to do something outside with your team, or go to a training session. Being inside all the time is not ideal. I totally get it. But we have to do it. It's important. So just to stress that too. So being outside, I love to hike, I love to bike, I love to run. I love my dogs, love to eat and cook. I don't know if there are dietitians out there who don't like to eat and cook, but maybe they exist. So yeah, that's a little about me specifically.
Nice.
We work with work with all types of people, just for the record. So there's about a dietitian out there who does every kind of specialty area that you can imagine. So from athletes, yes, if you go on to play even collegiate sports or professional sports or semi-professional sports, there will likely be a dietitian on your team. There are dietitians in hospitals, in health centers, in health clubs like me, everywhere. So we're invested anywhere there's a concern for health and wellness. There's a dietitian there likely.
Yeah. I think that's having been in like the sports performance realm for a little over a decade now, how you treat your body matters more than what you actually do to your body in training. And as like a sports performance guy, like that was like the hardest realization that I had was like, man, like we can be doing anything we want in the weight room, on the turf, training wise, but if you can't put it in your body or like do it effectively for your body, something like sleep, it really doesn't mean anything. So super important. And I like that. It was a very detailed explanation as to like what a registered dietitian is. Big time insurance too. Like that's another big factor is like most insurance companies will, because it's truly preventative medicine.
Yes.
Like what you put into your body helps fuel it, keep it safe and whatnot. So that's a big tip too. If you do check in with a registered dietitian, make sure you check and see what your insurance has, or they'll check and see what your insurance will cover.
Exactly right. Thank you for that plug.
Totally. Well, I mean, I mean, as a guy who uses my insurance to cover registered dietitian services, like it's huge.
Absolutely.
So I mentioned, I kind of joke, like if you can explain things to me like I'm 5 years old, it tends to work really well for my maturity level and just intellectual capacity. We'll start with this very broad question and maybe get a little bit more specific as we go. How does, we'll say, good nutrition, proper nutrition play a part in athlete recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I'm 5. I'm in kindergarten, so make sure like keep it simple.
I got it. Absolutely. Call me out if I'm going too deep. So just like I mentioned, you know, nutrition plays a different role and supporting role in health in all the different phases of life and for every person. So absolutely they play a major role in an athlete's life, not only preparing you for your competition or sport, but also supporting the training you're doing. So in recovery specifically, just like you mentioned, Casey, sleeping is so important. First of all, sleep is where all of your recovery, most of your recovery happens anyway. And the way that your body recovers is with nutrition. Literally, sleep is the mode you're in when you're recovering, and nutrition is the tool that your body is using to recover. So through nutrition, we take in all the different types of foods out there. So you've probably heard the words protein, the carbohydrates, and fats. Those are what we call those macronutrients. And all of those macronutrients that we consume, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, all the different foods that those foods, or that are foods that contain those macronutrients, are going to support the repair of your muscles. So again, protein is going to break down to those amino acids and those building blocks of all your muscle cells. And while you're sleeping, those proteins are going to work to repair your muscles literally. If we're not consuming enough energy overall also, we're not going to be able to recover or repair our tissues, okay? So nutrition literally is putting in, it's like building, trying to build a building without bricks. It was the best analogy I can think of for how nutrition or lack of nutrition, literally just not eating enough, kind of impairs your body's ability to repair literally. So again, thinking of food and nutrition as the most important supporting role in allowing you to continue to perform, recover for performance, and like I said, building the house with bricks and mortar versus trying to glue it together with some maybe Scotch tape and, you know, popsicle sticks
Nice.
or something like that.
Nice, yeah.
So yeah, it's essential. In terms of you know, in terms of like soreness, I think I saw you mention and energy levels. Again, you know, muscle soreness is it can be a factor of hydration as well, but also that energy, like you mentioned, or that you asked me to talk about too. Again, overall calorie intake, just making sure you're overall eating enough food is what is most important overall to support the recovery of all of your tissues. So again, it's normal to have that muscle soreness, that delayed onset muscle soreness, even where we have a lot of lactic acid buildup in the muscles. We've done a really hard workout. So what we need to do is consume a lot of fluids and continue to nourish our body with food, so that way our body can process that out and we're able to be ready and have less soreness for our next exercise or our next performance. And same for energy. Again, you know, food is energy. Food is fuel. If we are not consuming enough energy from food, we're not going to have the energy to show up to our next training event, sporting event, performance, whatever it is. We're just not going to be able to perform at the caliber we're expecting. So again, you know, thinking of food as the fuel, it's like, again, another analogy. I'm full of corny analogies here, guys. It's like taking your car to the racetrack and, you know, trying to run it on a half tank of gas and expecting it to win the race. And it's not going to happen. So again, just continuing to think of it as the most important tool in our toolbox to support your performance.
Nice. And maybe now we can get a little bit more specific. And like I mentioned to you, like I'm a big fan of habits. You know, like we work a lot, obviously, with student athletes, whether it be youth athletes, like 5th and 6th grade, even under, you know, but with our younger kids, it's like just actually our younger kids actually eat the best of everyone because they have like no decision making. But as our kids start to gain some level of independence, 5th, 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and then high school, and then obviously in college, they're on their own. I'm a big proponent of trying to instill habits with kids. Can you talk about maybe just some good things that go into like a pre-workout and maybe like when they should eat that? Is it like half hour? Some kids have like iron stomachs. They can be like eating it in like a warm-up line or something like that. But talk to me a little bit about like before or maybe during the day, if you have a practice at 5 o'clock or a game in the afternoon, like what does that pre-competition, pre-practice nutrition look like, and some habits to go along with it?
Absolutely. So first of all, good call out. You mentioned kind of like started to mention like the day. So remember that good nutrition starts early, right? So fueling appropriately for your practice, your event, whatever it is, starts way before that. Okay. So really, it's not like months before, or it can be weeks before, but again, even the day of, we need to be fueling adequately leading up to it. Not just that immediate time before. So again, when we think about, if we're in like kind of like a peak, like I don't know, maybe training phase and or like leading up to competition. So we're an active, athlete at this point. We want basically our meals to look like what we call like the power or performance plate, where we're, really taking half of our plate, or our meals should be what we call energy enhancing foods. So foods that are rich in what we're going to call carbohydrates. Okay. So again, using that fancy macronutrient word, carbohydrates are going to be things like your breads or pastas or potatoes or starchy vegetables. Okay. So we want half of our plate to really be rich in those foods. And the reason is those are going to give us the energy we need, in the form of glucose and glycogen. You might have know those words from, building muscle and all of those things. And our muscle stores those compounds to support giving us energy for performance when we need it. So again, it starts earlier in the day. So again, if we're at breakfast, we're having half of our plate with some sort of energy enhancing food. So that could be breakfast cereal, it could be oatmeal, it could be toast, it could be breakfast potatoes, something like that. And then the other half of our plate is divided in two. So we've got a quarter of it being our protein source and a quarter of it being our vegetables, and healthy fats and things like that. So that could look like an egg scramble with some potatoes and things like that. It could look like toast with, or a breakfast sandwich, right? So we got some options there. Could be cereal with some fruit, and like a hard cooked egg to go. So I know those are, kind of, it depends on what's available at home and what your day is looking like, or if you eat breakfast at school or something like that. And then moving throughout your day, you want to take that kind of, framework and apply it to your meals. So again, if we're having lunch at school, it should be, same thing. Half of our plate should be that energy enhancing food, some protein and some vegetables and some healthy fats and all of those things. And so again, as you get closer to your event or practice, what I would recommend is reducing the amount of protein and fat in your food and increasing the amount of carbohydrate, but overall decreasing your portion size. So you can think about it as like dose and timing. So as we get closer to that event, we have less time to digest it. So we want that dose to be a little bit lower potentially, okay? And the simpler it should be, the easier it should be to digest. So the more protein and fat we have in our diet, the slower digestion we have, okay? So it slows everything down literally. And that's like maybe you've had the experience of eating something like maybe a milkshake or something like that, maybe, or something like really yummy right before a practice, and maybe you've felt really sick. I don't know, I'm speaking from personal experience, having to run like a time trial mile and tried to eat a power bar beforehand and got really sick. So again, things that you can easily digest are going to be things that are a little bit lower in fiber. So maybe we're having some like a banana right before our practice, or we're having an easy digestible fruit, or we're having a piece of toast or something like that, or an English muffin or half a bagel. But again, if we have too much even of that food, it's going to be still in our system and it's going to be taking away the digestion of that food. Literally takes blood flow away from our other muscles, which causes GI issues like cramping or indigestion or things like that. So smaller dosing as we get closer to the event. But again, and it should be mostly carbohydrate by the time we're within an hour of that event. And again, leading up to that, the whole day, we should be having balanced meals where we're having a good amount of carbohydrate at each of our meals to support storing enough energy for performance during that event. Yeah. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
It does. And I think there's a really good tip on making sure the meal size actually diminishes as you get closer, because if you're crushing this giant meal trying to make up for missed meals during the day, it's not going to end well. And if you puke on our turf with Parisi, I'm going to be so upset. I have a question for you. Maybe it's like a myth. does meal frequency, like, maybe it matters, but you know, like for athletes, they're always like, you should eat 5 to 7 meals a day or what, like, talk to me about like meal frequency. Does it really matter? Or does it just matter like for our kids, like, remember, like just eat, like
Yeah,
if
so
we're
that's a
worried
great
about it, it doesn't really make too much of a difference.
That's a great question. So again, it's going to really depend on the individual for sure. I'll say that like up front. If you have specific questions about that, you can reach out to me and I can definitely help you address that based on the individual's maybe like GI tolerance, like we've been talking about. Basically, if you're not able to eat larger meals or tolerate larger meals, then sure, smaller, more frequent meals might work for you. At the end of the day, the most important thing is just eating enough. So however that works for you or however that breaks down. So again, you know, during the school day, that might not look like who can eat 5 to 7 small meals during the school day. I don't know if your school maybe allows you to eat in the classroom or things like that, but a lot of them don't. You know, so again, if it is 3 meals, that's fine. If it's 3 meals and some snacks, that's also fine. I would say optimally, we want to spread them out a little bit. You know, again, if you just eat one large meal with all of your calories for the day, that's not optimal either. And here's why. So that comes back to essentially stems from not only carbohydrate storage. So again, making sure we're storing glycogen and repleting our stores of glycogen for energy for use, but also for protein absorption and utilization. So again, you're putting all this hard work in training and for your performance and trying to build muscle and recover. And so again, we can only utilize so much protein at one time. So it does make sense to, you know, for protein timing to kind of spread that out more frequently, even more than your meals, because we can only utilize, I'll throw out a number, about 25 grams at a sitting, basically, meaning like not only absorption in the intestines, but then utilization into muscle repair and supporting the building of new tissue. So it would not behoove us to like sit down at a meal and just eat like 100 grams of protein and call it a day, because we're still only going to pull 25 from that and utilize that for or be able to absorb that and utilize that. The other stuff is going to get stored as extra energy or excreted, and our body has to work hard to process that out. So timing and spreading out protein is definitely important. But in terms of overall meals, you know, just kind of get it in. I would encourage people just to overall make sure you're just eating enough is definitely the end of the story there.
Yeah, for sure. If you could sit down and eat 100 grams of protein in one sitting, and then like your stomach just handle that.
Yeah.
That's the definition of an iron stomach. I'm not gonna lie, I probably could.
I was gonna say, you'd be surprised. It seems ridiculous. And then you realize like, you know, okay, maybe a 10-ounce steak has like, you know,
that's a lot. Yeah. I could totally have protein. For sure.
So yeah. So just again, spreading that out would be optimal, especially if you're using supplements. Again, spreading them out away from your meals again, you know, because otherwise we're just kind of wasting it, if that makes sense.
We'll get to supplements here for sure, because that's like whether parents or athletes, like it's the supplement questions that we get in a gym, but let alone someone like sports performance specific and like a lot of our kids are just ridiculously skinny, and getting them to gain weight will just inevitably improve their performance. Especially if you're like, you know, if you're an 87-pound, 13-year-old basketball player trying to jump higher, like at some point, you know, force is mass times acceleration. If you can just make that mass a little bit bigger, life is good. Baseball players, same idea. You know, if they want to increase miles per hour off the mound, typically the easiest way is to get them just to be a little heavier. You know, you can lift. Ooh, I hear the dogs in the background.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. They just came back from walk their little.
What kind of dogs do you have? We got
a cattle dog mix and a lab mix. So
nice. High energy. High energy. Let's move from pre-nutrition, because I think like intro workout, peri-nutrition, whatever phrase you want to call it, is getting now a lot of talk. And a lot of our athletes will actually train for upwards to 2 hours with us after school. You know, which is why we almost say like it gets them ready for competition. If you think of like how long a game might last, it's an hour of like pretty intensive sprint training and then an hour of strength training with a little bit of time in between for sure. It's not go for 120 minutes, but it's long. Like it's long enough where you need to pay attention to what you've had beforehand, or you're not going to feel good. And you need to pay attention to maybe what you have in the middle there. And then obviously post-workout nutrition is pretty easy for most kids because they're going home and eating dinner. But talk a little bit about what maybe options are for eating during a workout, whether it's a game, a long practice, a tournament. If you're an AAU basketball player and you got like 4 games in a day, like what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's going to be similar to the timing conversation as you get closer to the event, like we had mentioned before, or leading up to practice. You're going to want to set your days up before your major event. If it is something like a tournament, it came to mind right away. Sorry. So leading up to like a tournament, you're going to want to make sure that you're eating absolutely adequate meals and enough energy, having enough energy coming in through food in the days leading up to that tournament. So you can absolutely store as much energy as possible. And again, that plate should look like it. Half of it should be energy enhancing foods coming from carbohydrates, and some protein and some vegetables or color on your plate. And then again, snacks as should be following about that same. Now, during a tournament or something like that, this is a highly individual, so it's going to take some experimentation, especially or like during an event, a game or something like that. You're going to want to practice is the time to experiment with new foods. Again, you don't want to introduce something new during a tournament or during a game. If it doesn't work or if you can't tolerate it, the consequences are you're not feeling good, you're not performing right, and or you're having GI issues, you're in the bathroom or something like that.
Really good tip right there.
Rule number one, yeah,
really good tip.
Don't try something new before a game or a tournament. Coach will be very upset. And you'll be upset, you'll be frustrated. So at practices, generally speaking, that would be the best time to experiment. Again, the rules are going to be similar. So again, as you're exercising your body, or excuse me, exercising meaning like, expending energy through sport, your body is taking all of the blood flow basically and trying to put that at your muscles. So it's going to be pulling that away from the GI tract basically as much as possible. So the foods you put in or the nutrition that you put in during a sporting event should be very easy to digest. So again, things like liquids are going to be a great place to start. Things like your like Gatorade Sport, or for performance Gatorade, where you're getting carbohydrate there with some electrolytes. Again, carbohydrates are going to be the most important during an event, and really should be the primary thing you're consuming. And the easier to digest and absorb, the better, because that means the less work your GI tract has to do, the less blood flow that's pulled away from your muscles, and the less GI consequences that you're dealing with. So things that are simple to eat are going to be the best way to go. Again, gels or cubes are good as well. If you're using the Gatorade or Cliff shot blocks or something like that. And then something like even fruit would be a little bit of a step up in the direction of more whole foods. Okay, so the reason why we would stick with like liquids or gels is because again they're easy to digest. They're in specific dose containers or in dose specific sizes, and then again fruit or something like that would be something easy to digest. Again, citrus is a nice option, things like oranges, because you're also getting electrolytes with that. Bananas are generally speaking pretty easy thing to digest. And again, if you're over 75 minutes, we want to probably start repleting glucose. So again, thinking about using something like a Gatorade or something like a simple carbohydrate solution to replace during that event. If it's over 75 minutes, the longer you're going, the more we want to get into more even like solid food potentially. So again, that's where the tournament conversation comes in, or a very long event. We want to start having more solid food, and even that timing is going to want to be more frequent, that we're replacing carbohydrate, if that makes sense. Still, experimentation is you're going to want to don't try a new gel or a new drink or a new food before like the day of an event, because that would be, you just don't know how you're going to react to it. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Okay.
No,
perfect.
It absolutely does. I think that and maybe this will be very specific. Like, what is your stance? Like, I buy a 20-ounce bottle of Gatorade. Like, how should I be drinking that if I'm going in and doing a longer duration, over 75-minute workout? Maybe I'm doing a double session at Parisi. I got my bottle of Gatorade. How should I be drinking that over the course of the training?
Yeah. So again, that is going to be specific to the individual, but definitely. I would an experimentation and tolerance. But I would say, at the very least, you want to start replacing pretty early if you're going to be over 75 minutes. So again, if it is over 75 minutes, you want to start probably within 30 minutes repleting your carbohydrates, so that way you can get ahead of your depletion. So again, knowing that between sweat losses from replacing electrolytes and fluids, and also those carbohydrates get depleted within about 30 to 45 minutes of that exercise. So again, and then we start running on different reserves. So again, repleting pretty quickly, starting to replace quickly. So that way you're ahead of, the curve. Again, once you hit that 75, if you hit 75 minutes and then you start replacing, you're already too far gone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I should drink, I shouldn't dilute it or anything. Should I just drink the Gatorade and then front load it
I would
almost?
consider them a little separate. So I would have I would still have water for hydration. And again, your Gatorade is going to be providing carbohydrate and electrolytes, and then still having water separate for hydration. So kind of thinking of Gatorade as your nutrition, because it is nutrition, and then water as hydration. And so using both of those, but starting specific and drinking water as you need, but doing specifically timing your Gatorade, if that makes sense.
That's a major pro tip right there. That's a major pro tip, because a lot of our athletes routinely will do, like I just said, like almost 2 hours of training, and they're in like an off season. They're not necessarily layering that with other competition, but we do have some athletes as they go into preseason that will lift with us and then go to like an open gym, go to a captain's practice. And I think that's just a really good pro tip right there, to make sure you have both, and that you're specifically dosing the Gatorade or the carbohydrate like you talked about. It's good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, great.
That's why you're here. That's why you're here. That's the pro tip. That's good stuff. And then, so I want to go specific with post-workout nutrition. One, if you're an athlete looking to gain weight and you just beat yourself up, worked out hard, like obviously like you just went to caloric expenditure, and you're trying to gain weight, maybe you're just eating yourself back to normal levels. And then again, if you're an athlete maybe looking to I hate like weight loss, but like recomposition or body recomposition, even like if you're like, we have adult clients and things like that are just looking to shed body fat. Like what does that differ? Like, how does it differ for those people?
So a couple things, because that's a lot. So
I know it's very like that is the most individualized question I'll probably ask you this whole time.
Exactly.
But just general concepts, maybe rules of thumbs to avoid or things to look for.
Exactly. Okay, so perfect. So first off, I do have to say, if you do have a specific question about this related to your personal experience, please reach out to a dietitian or myself. We'd be glad to help you figure that out. So another thing right off the bat, weight gain really can't happen during an active competition season. Like it can, but it's really not ideal. And it's really hard to make gains in muscle and weight, as you probably know, during like an active competition season. And that should be done predominantly in the preseason or off season, again, because once we're in competition, we're just burning at such a high rate that it becomes and muscle synthesis just we're not able to meet up with the demands of our body and breaking down muscle. So it is really hard to gain weight during an active season of competition. That being said, so I guess, let's see, how do we want to frame this? Post-workout nutrition. Let's start with that. So if you are working out really hard, post-workout nutrition is really important. You want to eat within 30 minutes of completing that workout. So that can look like, if you know you're going home and you're going to eat a meal right away, you want to make sure, again, I'm going to refer to this, the performance plate. And I'm going to share that with you, Casey, so you can share that with your team if you want. So that way they know what I'm talking about. And I don't just sound like a crazy person saying the words performance plate over again.
I'm already Googling it, seeing it.
Perfect. I was going to say, actually, I might be able to share my screen. Do you want me to do that?
Yes,
I have it pulled up.
Let me see. Hold on. I think, yeah. Okay, now try.
Okay, perfect. Let me just pull this out.
Zoom has a bunch of new security features.
That is true.
So I just had to turn it on that you can share your screen.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and then show that with you. Okay, sharing now. So what this is, so this is from the Collegiate and Professional Sports Dietitian Association. So again, they're the expert organization when it comes to sports nutrition, and they are the organization for all sports dietitians. So down here, so performance plate. So this is what I was kind of referring to before. So if you are actively in season and you just finished a really hard workout, we want your performance plate look like this. So again, half of our plate should be those energy enhancing foods, and we still need that protein, and we still need, fruits and vegetables, or something what we call color on your plate after a workout. And again, that should be within about 30 minutes of your wrapping up your exercise. Again, if you know you're not going to get home, or you're in between classes. Like let's say you go to college and your training session is in the middle of the morning and you have to go to class right after that. We need to have a plan for you to have something basically right after that. And it should be rich in protein and carbohydrate, because we need both of those for recovery. If you're going to just have something like a recovery shake or recovery something, the magic ratio is 3-to-1. So 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein. So again, this is where you have seen the old adages, chocolate milk. It works because it is 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein. So it doesn't have to be chocolate milk. That's just an example.
Is it really that good though? Maybe that's like goes like the gut health myth. It's like,
I don't love milk, but so if you like milk and chocolate milk works for you, do it. Again, this is where the individual, right? Yeah, it comes up. Right. If you love some people hate chocolate, right? Which is weird.
What?
But
no,
I know.
That's not
I know.
true.
I've heard of these people.
Don't lie to the kids on this call. Don't lie to them.
But again, if you would prefer to do a shake, it just needs to also be that ratio. So it could be, you're doing, this is where maybe you're using a supplement or something like that. But again, that would not replace a meal. Again, you want to eat something pretty quickly after that. So again, something to hold you over, have that recovery, and then we're having a meal within at least a few hours of that. Okay. So I think I'm getting a little in the weeds here. So Casey, maybe redirect me. Where am I? I'm talking about post workout nutrition. We're talking about the performance plate. Okay. I think this is where I was. Yeah. So if you're in an off season or you're kind of preparing, so again, it depends on what phase you're in. So if you're in a gaining phase, we want to make sure you're having still probably this performance plate. So you're having more carbohydrates and also protein there to support gaining of mass overall. If we're in an off season and we're looking to maybe, I guess I hate to use the word cut or get leaner or
like a body composition
exactly shifting. Sure. Exactly. We're going to want to use definitely our off-season plate, which is, we want half of our plate to be fruits and vegetables and the other half still divided up between lean protein and whole grain. So having a little less of those energy enhancing foods coming from grains and specifically starchy vegetables, and more from regular, what we call non-starchy vegetables and fruits, if that makes sense. So again, a little bit more traditional. And then again, like I said, if you're trying to make gains, we're going to want to hit this plate over here, the half of it being our grains and starchy vegetables also. Okay. So again, it would be more specific and tailored to the individual, again, knowing that energy needs are going to be sports specific and individual specific, obviously. But again, generally speaking, this would be kind of my recommendation for that. Okay, perfect. What am I missing? I feel like there's many parts to the question, so I feel like I'm missing something.
No, you hit the nail on the head. I just was asking, like, if you're trying to gain weight, what should that look like? We always get in, and maybe I could be like a total like 15-year-old right now and be like, well, I'm not hungry after I work out. What now what? And do I sound like one of your clients? Like this is so good.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, my younger brother was that athlete. He was, just, so challenging in the sense that he was never hungry, was an endurance athlete and just not ever eating. And the price that you pay is, you're irritable yeah. and you're, not feeling good. You don't have the energy and you're not recovering as quickly. And then you get injured is the other thing that can happen. Right. So he had a wrist injury and that was his sport specific. He was a goalkeeper and he had a wrist injury. So, couldn't play. So those are the trade-offs to not eating enough. I would say it is hard to exactly. So you finish a workout. Do you want to chug a big thing of chocolate milk? Probably not. So giving yourself that time to recover, come down. You don't have to have something immediately walking off the pitch or walking off your sport, but you have to, within 30 minutes, I would encourage you to eat quickly within that time frame. And again, it can be dinner, it can be, or whatever meal is next, but definitely having something, again, thinking about how nutrition supports your body and how it supports your goals within the sport, right? So again, it is the tool that is going to also support you getting to that next level. Again, so just thinking about kind of the benefits. And I know it's hard when we're young to think about the long-term payoffs of something we're doing now, especially when we maybe don't feel as inclined or feeling as feeling how that is going to impact us now, or then. Exactly. So it can be hard, but I would say, even having something is better than nothing. So finding whatever foods that player does like, even if it is fruit and peanut butter, if it's, just getting creative, and, really, like I said, the most important thing at the end of the day is overall enough energy intake. So just making sure that we're getting in overall adequate calories is kind of the name of the game. So it could be, they make Pediasure out there. I don't know how young our kids are, but again, that's something that's basically essentially, a kid's version of a protein shake. It could be something like making our own smoothies at home, which are a little bit easier to tolerate sometimes after a workout. So that might be an option too. But again, whatever
eat it, drink it.
Yeah, exactly. So again,
helps.
It does. And again, thinking about it as essentially kind of broken down a little bit too. So if you literally feel ill after a workout, some players do feel nauseated. Two things. One, you want to also look back and see what we did ahead of the day, to see if there was anything that might have triggered our symptoms. What did I eat leading up to that practice? What did I eat leading up to that game, that made me maybe not feel so great right now? Was it just my efforts? Am I also not hydrating enough? Again, a lot of symptoms of not feeling good, like if I feel like I have a headache or I'm fatigued or I'm feeling nauseated, a lot of those symptoms are related to dehydration. So again, just remembering to make sure you're drinking enough also. Okay, perfect. I feel like I'm on my soapbox. So let me know what else, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, I like what you first said, like if, our athletes that are like, man, I'm just not hungry. Like a lot of it, it's choices, and maybe this is kind of harsh, but we do a lot of goal setting with our athletes. And like, if one of your goals is driven by nutrition, like, unfortunately, that's not the best answer at that point. Like, it's a choice and there's options, like you're saying, and you have to find what works for you. And there's professionals that can help with that. But if you're the 87-pound, 15-year-old basketball player and you're trying to, put on some size because, it's going to help you in the post, or you're looking at like, we have a young man whose parents are like, they're super tall. They're like 6'5". Is the dad, and the mom is like 6 foot. And we're looking at the kid and he's like 5'5" and he's 11. We're like, dude, like, it's coming, man. Like, you can either start now or you can,
Right.
catch up later. But you're going to hit that growth spurt. It's coming. So it's just a series of choices. And yes, I know that the kid, like, the example is like an 11-year-old, but like, it's choices. Like, it's a series of choices at that point.
Yes, exactly. And again, I think, just again, highlighting the importance of just any food, really. Like, I hate to say it that way, but again, it's not worth the battle to pick and choose over the specifics. Get into the conversations with your individual athlete or family about what they do like and what works for them. And at the end of the day, what is most important is just overall adequate calorie intake. I can't say that enough. Again, and then again, we can get into specifics if you have specific questions, if anybody does, at a separate time or follow up email. But again, like I said, end of the day, moral of the story for all, especially like school aged athletes, is really just going to be getting in enough.
And I've got two broad, so I don't want to like switch dramatically. I got two kind of broad questions. One, it refers to kind of like the shutdown, self-isolation period we're in right now. Like, how does nutrition change? Like, how should it, like, how does it change, like, right now? Maybe it's even things like what you're experiencing, like, in your life. Like, you just go from like walking around a big building like the Edge to now I'm in my garage gym all day, and what am I filming content for different places and stuff.
Right.
Like, things change. Like, these kids, they're athletes. They're used to maybe like an hour and a half of field hockey or soccer practice this night, basketball practice this night, and then all of a sudden, like, it changes. Yep. I think for most kids, like we talked about last week in our coaching call, like, this is the best opportunity, I think, for sports performance, because you don't have all these compounding stressors on your life.
Yes.
But you have other stressors now, like, there's no friends, you're doing remote school, you're now, parents, you're homeschool teachers, not like the actual teachers. So just talk to me maybe a little bit about how nutrition could change, or things people could be experiencing, and just how to navigate that a little bit.
100%. Absolutely. So again, if you stepped foot into a grocery store recently, I don't know, the panic is palpable, in terms of, feeling kind of a little bit of stress. And I think it's realistic to assume also that one of the big shifts could be not having enough of the foods that we're used to having. So again, if you are used to, just like specific brands or specific types of things. And that's the kind of specificity with which you eat. You know, it could be really tough right now because you're not maybe finding those specific items. I don't know, maybe it's a specific bread that you love, or a type of, you know, whatever. So again, knowing that the stores are just a little less stocked than they were. So being flexible is really hard, but it is really important. And, you know, as an athlete, that's part of building the athlete mindset, of course. And again, I'm not an expert in that, so I'll stop talking about things that are beyond my scope of practice. But again, being flexible is a really important component of that. So again, you know, using whatever we have available at home. Again, so things like, you know, if we're thinking like we don't have a ton of the meats that we're used to having, maybe for protein sources, again, using things like our canned goods. So things like canned tuna, canned salmon, or maybe we're not finding, you know, the breads that we're used to. So maybe we're getting creative and we're looking in the freezer section and we're finding different breads that we're maybe less familiar with, but still can use. And maybe overall, I mean, I don't want to say that kids don't eat vegetables, so I'm gonna say this, but you know, if you are finding less fresh vegetables or maybe the vegetables that you do, trying to get creative and experimental with some of the vegetables that you do have, or frozen or canned. Nothing is bad is the other thing. So like I was talking about before, you know, what is most important is just overall intake. So again, if you're struggling with finding out or finding the right foods or the foods that you're used to, trying to get creative and trying to get flexible with what you do have. Again, the other thing I can think about really directly is kind of that schedule. So again, losing that schedule with maybe and structure with school or your day as you know it, can be really hard when it comes to eating, because eating, we tend to, as a society, structure around our day instead of around what we necessarily even need. So again, if you're losing that structure and you find yourself missing meals or skipping meals or skipping snacks that you're used to having, my recommendation is to really try to create some structure for your day as much as you can. And again, as it might be easy to you know, fall into a habit of like, you know, sleeping in late. I don't know what your household looks like. Maybe this is it. Sleeping in late, you know, getting to school a little bit later than usual, maybe not exercising as much or strength training as much or whatever. What's most important overall though, remember, is nutrition doesn't stop. You know, training might slow down a little bit, but you still need to eat enough. Remember that your body requires a basic level of nutrition just to function. If you were to not move your body 1 ounce or one minute, one movement. So eating enough is important no matter what you're doing or whatever training you're doing, whatever phase of training you're in. It is still important to eat enough throughout the day. So my recommendation is really probably just to try to find some structure, try to continue to have maybe your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and try to have some snacks throughout the day. Again, when those start and end, that's less important, but again, still trying to provide some structure to make sure you're getting in enough food. Yeah, and just getting creative. Like I said, you know, things that can be really helpful right now are things like also like canned beans, you know, and I know it sounds to kids uninspiring, but to the parents out there, you know, getting creative about blending those into soups and stews to get that protein content up. You know, again, those are really easy ways and cost-effective ways also to supplement dishes or supplement meals to support meeting the energy needs of your athlete, maybe with less ability to get to the store more often.
Yeah, I've been grocery shopping every 2 weeks, and I used to love grocery shopping. I, for some reason, think it's like a stress reducer for me, but I now hate it. It's just not fun and enjoyable. But I've been Googling random like things that I find in my pantry and just putting in the word recipes. So like the other day, I had like a can of chickpeas, which are like perfect. You can do anything with chickpeas.
Yes.
I had chickpeas. I had pickled beets, and there was like some other like really obscure thing that I didn't end up using, but I ended up getting this like really good like mix, like almost like a cold salad type recipe with like a weird honey, what's like apple cider vinegar dressing.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good. It was pretty good. It was, I mean, it was weird, and I'm not an apple cider vinegar guy. Can't stand the smell, but pro tip, from a lazy lazy cook, just Google the recipes. Like just put like the random ingredients and then add the word recipe.
Somebody's made it.
Someone's
Is true.
doing it. There's so
Somebody's
many
made
like
it.
blogs and recipe places now that you'll find something and you can probably make a dressing that'll go over anything and it'll taste good.
When in doubt, blenders. Like also, like, if you have a bunch of ingredients that you're not sure what to do with, soup is, and blend it together, or tomato sauce. If you have pasta sauce and you don't have a lot else, I always tell people pasta sauce is basically asking to be augmented. So just dump your pasta sauce in a blender. If you have some like frozen spinach or something that you're just like, I don't know what to do with it, toss it in the blender, toss in like your chickpeas or lentils or something like that, blend it up. And then toss it over pasta and call it a night again. So it doesn't have to be gourmet. Again, I know under better circumstances, we're all choosing the foods that we love and we're, thriving about it and we're feeling good, which, hey, maybe we have some new perspectives when we come out of this and we start to appreciate food maybe a little bit more too, is the other thing. But again, just dealing with what we've got. And that's enough right now is what I always tell everybody. Just make sure you're getting enough in.
For sure. Okay, the last thing, this is my favorite thing. I always I host a podcast and like I always end with like a speed round, which is like super degenerate. It has nothing to do with like anything educational. This is somewhat educational. Okay. What I'm going to do is just give you the name of a supplement and just give me your thoughts on that supplement. Whether it's one, if it's good, bad, two, like if you, and keep in mind, these are a lot of like high school kids, or like maybe what age it could be appropriate to take it. And just make sure parents know that it's not steroids. Like if I get another parent that calls me and is like, is creatine a steroid? I'm like, no, oh my God, just chill. Okay. So we'll start with that. Okay. Creatine.
Okay, creatine should be creatine monohydrate. It is good. It can be effective, 3 to 5 grams a day. No loading phase necessary. Generally good. Look for NSF safe for sport is what I would say.
Boom. That's probably like the global thing too. Like always look to make sure it's NSF safe for sport. People that, if it is safe for sport, they advertise that. That's a huge marketing piece. So it's very clearly labeled. It's a little green check mark, I believe. Branch chain amino acids, BCAAs.
I would say not really that helpful, probably. Again, this is where food comes in. So my speed round is like, meh, is how I feel about them. Again, it's a lot of money goes into supplements. They this is something that you can get. The most important branch chain amino acid is leucine. You can get it from whey protein or dairy. Supplements can be easily contaminated. Again, we talked about why you would want to look for one that's NSF certified, safe for sport. And again, BCAAs, we can get those from foods specifically. Again, if you're having a really hard time getting in those specific amino acids, let us know. We can help you with that. But I would say meh is my answer for BCAA. Sorry.
Any difference for EAAs, essential amino acids?
Again, not really. Again, I would say food. Food is where we get our essential amino acids, right? So again, if you are having trouble, again, building mass or wanting specific things, we can talk about that. But again, I would say food is predominantly where I would want everybody to go first. Again, supplements we just run that risk of contamination. It's costly, all these things. So just trying to get it from food first would be my recommendation.
Gotcha. Caffeine.
Oof, caffeine is it depends is my big answer with caffeine. So it can be effective. Again, it can't hurt you necessarily. It could. For performance though, we know that there are 4 different genetic processors, basically 4 different types of genetic expressions of people who process caffeine differently. So it is really it depends. I know.
Oh, we just went down a rabbit hole as a notorious coffee drinker. I wish I had started with this question for my own selfish purposes. So like 4 different, basically there's 4 different people that process caffeine differently in the body.
So forgive me, you and I could be different genetic or have different genes that process caffeine differently.
We handle it differently.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm not using the words correctly, and I'm trying not to use too much jargon. So again, it really depends. Again, every athlete.
You can jargon this one up. This one's for me. You can jargon this one up.
So it really just depends because we won't know, how you process caffeine unless you do a genetic test, which you can do pretty easily now.
I kind of want to do it
through things like Inside Tracker, things like specifically Nutrigenomics is a company based out of Canada. It's run by a sports dietitian. But my point is, genetic testing would be the only way to know. Again, if you're a younger athlete, not worth it. caffeine also might not be great for younger athletes, right? Hydration is really important if we're supplementing with caffeine because it is a diuretic. It can enhance performance in endurance athletes. Again, you'd want to check if you are going to try to use it for improvement in outcomes. We're going to want to probably check that genetic type because there are a few expressions of this gene for processing that caffeine could slow you down or hinder performance. So
adverse effects for sure.
Exactly. So certainly check that out if you are using that or want to use that or taking that down the road. Again, also NCAA does have upper limits for caffeine intake. So trying not to overdo it or taking like caffeine pills before a workout or a competition where you might be tested. What else? What am I trying to think about caffeine? That's pretty much it. I would say it depends. Generally speaking, would a cup of coffee hurt you? No. Would taking a lot of caffeine pills and expecting to see the best outcomes? Yes, that could hurt you. So that, I guess that answers that. Not short at all.
Nice. I'm trying to think. I know those are like the big three. Oh, well, let's just do this general one. Whey protein.
Yeah. So again, with whey protein, again, you'd want to find one that is generally NSF safe, certified safe for sport, or just a high quality whey protein isolate alone, trying to look for as few other ingredients as possible. Again, protein timing is pretty important as we spoke about earlier. So if you are taking a whey protein supplement, trying not to take it with a meal, but rather in between meals or right after your workout, again, to enhance recovery. Whey protein would be advisable because it is rich in leucine, a branched chain amino acid, which stimulates muscle synthesis. So whey protein is appropriate in some circumstances. Again, I'm not going to say that's true for every athlete in every case. Again, knowing that for individual recommendations, reach out to a dietitian or myself if you have any questions. Or again, if you're allergic to dairy, please do not use whey. Things like that.
That's a good recommendation there as well. Because that's like one thing, like we'll always get like the 12-year-old, they're like, yeah, protein shake. And people are like, or parents are kind of like, oh, should my kid be taking it? And I'm like, well, the worst thing that happens is they just spend a little extra time on the toilet.
Exactly. And then cost too. So again, if you would rather not deal with the cost of it, again, guess where whey comes from? It comes from dairy. Again, so using, or even something like, I know it sounds silly, but things like Ensure or Pediasure, guess what they're made out of? There's a whey protein isolate in there. They're a little bit more cost effective. They come in easy to use containers, whatever works. But again, and food, right? So again, if you don't want to spend the money, nutrition is your friend, right? Food is your friend.
Yeah. And is whey protein a viable during workout, like an intra workout supplement, or no?
That's again highly individual. I would say,
I would say like dairy.
Yeah. I would say you could have some before your workout. I probably wouldn't have it during your workout as my own personal clinical. Maybe there are dietitians who would say for a specific case that would be appropriate. Again, I would say you don't gain any advantage probably from having it during a workout rather than after. Again, we know that recovery phase lasts for up to 24 hours afterwards. So you wouldn't necessarily like hedge your recovery by trying to implement it earlier. And again, it's most effective for recovery, in terms of stimulating muscle synthesis while you're even like sleeping. So taking some even before bed would be, kind of optimal for recovery of that muscle mass.
Nice. I think that's like the general athlete supplements that we see.
Perfect.
Everything is in powder form. I always tell parents if it's like in powder form, it's probably not a steroid. It's hard, or it's just not a very good steroid.
Yes, exactly. You'd be so surprised. I will say, unfortunately, the supplement industry, as you know, Casey, is not regulated. Yeah. So it can be the Wild West. I don't want to say supplements can be used effectively and they can be safe and they can be appropriate. Just be smart. Again, the NSF, as you mentioned, NSF certified safe for sport, companies want that on their label because it is an indicator of quality. And that is what I would look for if you do use a supplement. There are several brands out there, or many brands that that you can, find that use that seek that certification. Nice. And that would be my best recommendation.
Nice. Well, what I'd like to do now is if anyone has any questions, I see a lot of muted screens and videos off, but if anyone has any questions, they're more than welcome to jump in. I know I've asked a lot, but we'll wrap up with a little Q&A. And if no one's there, then Gretchen, I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. I do see something in the chat. So I just hit that. So I'm just going to read that real quick. So
that might be a private one to you because there's nothing in the group chat.
Oh, it does say, okay. Oh, yep, it is. So I'll not answer that one out loud and not say who it's from. Thank God I didn't do that. See, I'm not very good at Zoom either. Okay, perfect. So I'll get back to that person. Any questions though? Anything specific? If not,
from the audience. Well, let's do this. Gretchen, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they have questions?
Absolutely. So you can reach me via email. So my email is Gretchen, GRETCHENZ as in zebra, at edgevt.com. So you can reach out to me that way. If you also just, I know we're kind of in a weird place right now with everybody quarantined and not being open and all of that. But once we're open, if you would rather popping in to say hello, I am based out of the Twin Oaks location. So if you're ever over there, you can, pop up to my office by the group fitness classes. And I'm there. So you can always say hi to me there.
Are you doing telenutrition right now?
We are.
Yep. Are you taking on any new clients with that? Or?
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. So people can get in contact with you.
Absolutely. So reach out to me via email. Again, we are covered through most insurances. If you have, everybody is basically covering telehealth these days, given the circumstances. So if you do have specific questions or want a specific session to be scheduled, reach out. We can get that done even in quarantine times.
Nice. Awesome. So I'll let you reply to that message, or if you want to get information from that person. I don't know if I end the meeting, if that's going to
I was just thinking that
maybe I'll leave it running. Maybe I'll leave it running for a couple minutes here.
I'll turn off my video and mic and then I'll wrap up.
Well, thank you so much for making the time, Gretchen. It was awesome. This is the first time we've ever connected professionally too. So I really appreciate it. And it's been, it was awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thanks everybody. I appreciate it.